Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav Network. Check out Bleav in Astros with Mike Stanton and Bleav in Texans with Cecil Shorts. Joining me, my co-host, Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism between the two of us. And later in the show, did we jump the gun on the Jalen Green leap? And is Jabari Smith turning into the Rockets' Kenyon Green? But Stephen, I can't believe I had to be glass half full guy on the Texans postgame. Am I getting too soft?
Yeah, I was all fired up and waiting for a Robert rant. And here you're the positive guy and Tom's a little on the better side. What did you guys change costumes before the show or something? I'm not sure what happened there.
Oh, Tom was a little bit. I think he was pretty positive. It's hard to get him off.
He actually was. I mean, gosh, it's hard to find the silver lining in a game like that, but it was hard on everybody if you're a Texans fan.
Yeah, we're going to get into some of the stuff that I'm going to be a little bit more difficult with on the Texans, but also something to just take a look at and focus on as far as Caserio is concerned, but more Texans in just a bit. Heads up, though, today's show brought to you by MyBookie. Get in on the fun during the heart of the NFL season and early NBA season. Hey, you can usually find an edge or two early in the NBA season, so you're going to want to take advantage of that, make a little cash for some holiday spending money. NFL is always fun to get in on while you still got a shot. That's always a great way to make a little extra for the holidays, and we got a deal for you too. MyBookie doubles your first deposit up to $1,000. That's a 100% deposit bonus. Look for the promo link and code in the description. Your code is HST, as in Houston Sports Talk. Pretty easy to remember, but if you forget, just check it out in the description on YouTube, or if you're listening on the audio podcast, it's right there as well. But check out MyBookie. It's the place to go. All right, Stephen, the good news is here's the Texans' murderer's row of QBs coming up. Cooper Rush, Will Levis, Trevor Lawrence. And if they can just take out the trash, the Texans could easily be 9-4 in 3 weeks.
Well, you know, that's the thing though, Robert, is they should. But how many times have we said this only to be disappointed in the long run? And that's, you know, but you've got to start somewhere. I mean, with a loss like this, you've got to look for the positives where you can get them. And you know, we can get into some of the game pauses on you, and Tom covered a lot of that. But if you're looking down the road, you know, of course, you don't want to look too far down the road. Yeah, you've got the Cowboys coming up. It's Monday Night Football, though, and you just never know what happens on Monday night. The Cowboys they're smarting. I mean, they've lost Prescott. They've been beaten to a pulp basically this whole season, certainly the last few weeks. So this is a team that the Texans should beat. This is a game the Texans should win. And again, we put underlines, italics, all caps around should.
You Bleav they're 7.5-point favorites against the Cowboys?
Well, that is a little surprising, I guess, when you look at just how they play. But if you think about it, look, the Detroit Lions, I know the Chiefs are unbeaten, but with the exception of, you know, the Texans game and maybe one other, the Lions have just totally dominated teams in the NFL this year, and to have them on the ropes by 16 points at the half, you know, that tells you that the Texans are capable of beating just about anybody. You know, never mind the collapse in the second half. They certainly could have won that game. So the fact that they played so well in the first half against Detroit and almost beat this team, I guess it's not too surprising. And then when you consider what the Cowboys have done, or should I say not done this season, maybe that's not such a bad stretch.
All right. My first thought for this show really is that the general managers and coaches on our local teams, they've really got to start doing something called self-scouting. Let's start with the Texans. Basically, Stephen, I mean, you got to take a look in the mirror and go, where can I improve? If Nick Caserio self-scouts, he's got to be honest and say, look, I need to get better people to scout offensive linemen. I can't complain about any other position groups right now, Stephen, but look at his offensive line evaluations. He overpaid Titus Howard and Shaq Mason with their extensions. Frankly, he really wasn't bidding against anybody. Kenyon Green's a first-round bust. The fact that Jared Patterson is playing center instead of guard means that second-round pick Juice Scruggs might be a bust. He's also calculated wrong on Laramie Tunsil's football character with that extension. I'm not mad at talent evaluation overall for him, but or on Tunsil, but that was a character issue that you had to see coming, Stephen.
Well, Robert, I've been thinking about this, and let me just say, I don't believe the Texans are going to go deep in the playoffs or win a Super Bowl, whether it's this year, next year, the year after, until they have an elite offensive and defensive line. And I know I'm dating myself here, but I remember a time when the Oilers went out in consecutive years. They got Mike Munchak, Bruce Matthews, two very elite linemen to protect their quarterback. And no, they didn't win a Super Bowl either, but they certainly got the pieces in place to do it. And until the Texans figure this out, especially on the offensive line, until they start winning the war in the trenches on both sides, this team is just going to play with us and act like they're going to get there, but they're not going to get there.
Yeah, you can go back to the Cowboys, who had a famous offensive line back in the 90s. But on the other hand, name a Patriot offensive lineman from the Brady era. I mean, it doesn't have to be like all first-round picks.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to be big names, but they were effective.
Oh, absolutely. And hey, let me just say this, because you throw that out there and you put it on social media and everybody goes, well, you want Caserio fired. Oh, you're right. Let's get him out of here. Well, before you fire Caserio and say, oh, we're done with him, look at the record, people. He traded up for Will Anderson and Nico Collins, two potential All-Pros. He got Nico in the second round. He gave up a seventh-round pick for Joe Mixon. He signed three studs in the offseason, Daniil Hunter, Aziz, and Danico Autry, who has been making some big plays the last 2 weeks, by the way, Danico. He fleeced the Cleveland Browns on the Deshaun Watson trade. And in the last 3 years, he's drafted Kamari Lassiter, Derek Stingley, Kalen Bullock, Tank Dell, Jalen Petrie, Henry To'oTo'o, and Christian Harris. And even John Mechie has to be reevaluated after what we saw from him on Sunday. Do you remember, Stephen, what Rick Smith would get in rounds 2 through 4?
Yeah, they're all pretty forgettable, aren't they? Listen, Robert, I don't care who the general manager is. If this were a baseball game, Nick Caserio would step in the batter's box, and he's going to strike out every once in a while. And he's going to get some hits and some singles and doubles. And, yep, he's even going to hit some out of the park every once in a while. That's just how the game goes. When you draft and scout that many players, you can't hit on them all. I mean, nobody does. Even the best general managers, the ones that win Super Bowls, they're going to have their bad picks too. We can criticize Caserio on the offensive line. That's fair. But if you're looking at his overall, I mean, come on. It's just going to happen every now and then. And it's not as if he's been with the team, 5-10 years. He's not young in his tenure, certainly. But he's done enough, in my mind, to say that you certainly don't want to get rid of him, and you definitely want to give him a shot to try to straighten out this offensive line.
I wish I knew who his scouting people were with the Texans on the offensive line, and maybe it was just completely different guys in New England. That's what I'm wondering, because obviously, he was head of the player personnel with the Patriots in those last few Super Bowls. He was helping bring some of those guys in. Maybe he had different people helping him out. It's just, again, this is like self-scouting. We'll get to the Rockets in a bit, but we talked about it with Frank last week about, hey, the Rockets need to self-scout and say, maybe we need to bring in an offensive guy, because I don't think Udoka brings anything really creative or inventive on the offensive side. It's the same thing with the Texans. Like, figure out what you're doing wrong, figure out what you're doing right. And when you're doing something wrong consistently, correct it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not arguing with you, and that's certainly what you would do. And if you and I were in that position, Robert, I mean, it's easy to say we would do that, and that's certainly what the Texans need to do. Is they certainly need to reevaluate some aspects of their scouting, at least when it comes to certain positions. But I also have to wonder, and we've talked about the offensive line coaching. How much of it can you put on the coaches? The ones that the Texans have had the last few years. How much can you put on the injuries that this line has sustained, especially last year? Although you can certainly say last year, even with all those injuries, they were more effective than they were this year if you looked at the big picture over the whole season.
Yeah, also to be fair to Rick Smith, there were Connor Barwins, Brooks Reeds, and Brandon Brooks. So I don't want to kill Rick Smith the way I was earlier, but there was also DJ Swearinger, Brandon Williams, Sam Montgomery, Xavier Suafilo,
Yeah.
Dorowitz, Lewis Nix, Jalen Strong, Nick Martin, Braxton Miller.
There was a bunch of them.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, Stephen.
Yeah.
And some of those guys never even got out of training camp that they drafted in rounds 2 through 4, much less play an NFL snap. So,
yeah.
Yeah,
get that bad taste out of your mouth here.
Yeah. Let's talk about what our friend of the show, John Crumpler, had to say. The Texans USA Today analyst posted a piece calling for Bobby Slowik's job, with quarterback coach Jerrod Johnson replacing him. Now, it's hard to know without being in the coaching room. I will say this to John, that is Johnson really wanting to implement ideas Slowik is taking off the table? You know, you heard D'Amico in the press conference this week say, hey, it's really a group thing here. It's not other people are eliminated from the process of game planning and all that. What I will say, Stephen, is I have 3 Bobby Slowik critiques, and I'm interested in what you have to say to the 3 critiques. Number 1, his calls late in games have been head scratching. Going back to the Bengals game last year, not just this year, but going back to that game when Stroud had that pick 6 up by 10. Remember how there were only there's only like 3:40 left. The Bengals had 1 timeout. You could have just ran some time off the clock, or at least forced them to call that last timeout. Number 2, for a team desperately needing pass rush relief, how has there not been more first down play action with Joe Mixon, or more bubble screens? We saw that work perfectly when he actually did try it on Sunday night. So that I don't understand that. That's my second thing. My third thing, why can't these guys get to the line of scrimmage quicker? So maybe Stroud's not rushing, or maybe it'd give Stroud a better chance to vary his snap count, considering everybody's just teeing off on our O-line. I mean, those are my pet peeves, Stephen.
Yeah, those are great points. Let me get back to the Crumpler thing for a second. I mean, obviously something needs to change, but my question is, how much would really change if Jerrod Johnson takes over? I mean, you're not going to fire D'Amico, certainly not right now. So if you're going to get rid of someone, Slowik is probably the guy. It should be the guy probably. But how much would really change if Jerrod Johnson takes over? I mean, unless D'Amico is giving his blessing and saying, look, this whole playbook needs to change, and we need to start making better decisions, especially in the second half. Now, you know, to getting to the second half, I saw a quote from Joe Mixon after the game that I think was very telling. And I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm paraphrasing. But essentially what he said was the Texans played not to lose the game in the second half. They played not to lose. Robert, you and I both know, we've been around this long enough. When you play to lose against anybody, and especially against the Detroit Lions, who already just, sung their praises earlier, more often than not, you're going to lose those games. And that's exactly what the Texans did.
Yeah, you remember that with the Oilers. I think some people thought, they're still trying to be aggressive, just run the ball, you're up by. And I think you stick with what you've done until it gets towards the end of the game, and then you literally can run. You can't run out the clock like in that Bills game in the third quarter. And not to lose. It was like the not to lose Oilers, and you felt that. You could sense it from the team.
Yeah, and not only that, but they weren't even running the ball well in the first half to start with. I mean, the Lions were playing inside really well. They hampered the Texans' running game even in the first half when the Texans were scoring, but at least to a certain degree.
Part of that, I saw, people, now they doing better with the pass, but they can't run with a new offensive. Look, the Lions had the 6th best defensive run defense in the NFL. They're playing a higher caliber opponent. I brought that up as well on the post-game show. I just think people miss that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, again, you've got to go to the drawing board, and you've got to have a whole plan for 60 minutes. I know we use the old cliche, you got to play a full 60 minutes, but it's not just that. You've got to map out a plan for the whole 60 minutes. And you also have to know that the Lions are going to go in at halftime, or whomever you're playing, when you're up by 16 points, 10 points, whatever, they're going to make adjustments. So what you have to do is make adjustments to their adjustments and try to at least anticipate that they're going to come out and they're going to play a little differently than they did in the first half.
Let's move to some Rockets, but more Texans coming up, and I'll explain in a second. But just a quick reminder, look for our live Texans post-game shows after every game. Tom Chavarie and I break it all down Monday night. Tomorrow I've got Texans-Cowboys preview. Oh, you're going to love this. I got a Texans-Cowboys preview with a former Dallas Cowboy wide receiver. So we got a guy that was there at one point and he might have some interesting things to say. You don't want to miss it. And make sure to support our content by giving us a thumbs up, commenting, and subscribing for free on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. All right, Stephen, the Rockets won their last 2 games as we speak right now, as we're recording, against the Pistons and the Wizards. But I can tell you the fan base is not exactly thrilled with how they look. Despite that, the offensive structure looks terrible. No creativity, and they can't shoot straight, Stephen.
That's right. And I saw a stat where, the Rockets are among the top teams in the NBA in second chance points. All right. Well, that's all well and good, Robert, but what does second chance points mean? It means you're missing shots, a lot of shots. Yeah, you're missing those first chance shots. So I would much rather that the Rockets have a higher shooting percentage, period, and make more of those first shots than them being ranked, second, third, among the tops in the league in second chance points. And I think that is just one of the biggest things that is going to dog, that has dogged this team, and it's going to continue to dog them all season long until they figure it out. You can beat the teams like the Wizards and the Pistons and all that, but as we saw, you go up against teams like the Warriors. Okay, they did look impressive against the Mavericks and a couple other teams, but in the long run, that's the kind of stuff that's going to bite you in the butt. You've just got to get better shooting overall and take better shots. And missing 3-pointers left and right, that's been another issue that this team has had all season.
Yeah, and it's time for us to get to some of the culprits of the missed shots, because I can tell you who's the problem. And we'll start off with this thought. With Fred VanVleet out of the lineup Monday, Jalen Green had a golden opportunity to show what he could do against a horrible Wizards team. He blew it. 6 turnovers, sloppy play, inefficient offense. And Stephen, after the first few games, he's quickly slipped into the same old Jalen. The inefficient offense is without question what bugs me the most and should scare the front office. His field goal percentage worse this year than it has been. That great 3-point shooting back to his career average, pretty much. His assist and rebound percentage are down. His turnover percentage is up. This is scary, Stephen, especially after you gave him that big money, big contract.
Yeah, that's the risk you always take, Robert. And I just think, I know over the course of a season, you're going to have some peaks and valleys, but I think we're a little extra sensitive with Jalen just because of what we saw last year. And then all of a sudden he turns on the afterburners in the last couple of months. You want to see him do it more consistently over the course of a season, or really several seasons now that you've signed him to that big contract. I mean, if he's going to be a superstar, that's just what superstars do. They're going to have very few off nights. The Michael Jordans, LeBron Jameses, yeah, those guys had off nights, but how many of them do you remember? Probably very few, if any. So that's what Jalen has to figure out is, if he's going to be a star in this league, if he's going to be one of the elite players, he's got to bring it every night. He's got to get better on his shot selection. He's got to make those 3-pointers, and he's got to do it consistently with very few valleys that you go through toward the whole end of the season.
Yeah, and there's people that occasionally come at me and like, oh, you weren't big on Jalen. Well, hey, look, Jalen Green, when he has 2 or 3 good games in a row, don't get excited and come at me. He's got to do this over time, not just 3 games, not just 5 games, not just a month like we saw in March. He's got to do it over time. And you talked about making 3-point shots, Stephen. I'm going to give you a stat that'll scare the hell out of you. Jabari Smith leads the NBA in the worst percentage on wide open 3-pointers. He's shooting 15%. So like this whole idea of, oh, Jabari Smith, it's all Udoka. He's not getting him good shots. No, he gets plenty of good shots. That is over with. And I'm going to make this case. Is he becoming the Rockets' Kenyon Green, a high first-round bust? Well, maybe not Kenyon in that he's playable, but he's nowhere close to being a starter and showing 0 improvement. In fact, his shooting's clearly regressed. You got a 6'11 player shooting a pathetic 39.3% from the field, not from 3, from the field, 39.3%, 25% from 3, steals, assists, blocks, and rebounds, all dropped this year, all 4 categories. Not that they were amazing to begin with. And there's more, sadly, Stephen. I've got more. His best attribute, that one-on-one defense, it's, I don't even know if it's average. He currently has no elite skill. And at the moment, nothing even looks average for a power forward or a center. Jabari's also terrible at finishing around the basket. He's a poor off-ball defender. And for all you blaming his offense on Udoka, again, stop with it. This is wide open stuff. Opponents don't respect his jumper at all. We all believe his shooting made him a top 3 talent. So I'm officially calling him a bust. Stephen, mark it down, November 13th, 2024. Jabari's a bust.
All right. Well, I'm not ready to give him the Kenyon Green toilet bowl medal just yet, but he's, it's clear. I mean, the numbers are clear and they certainly are convincing with that. I don't know how much of it is just gotten into Jabari's head, especially with the wide open shots. It's kind of like free throw shooting. When you're a poor free throw shooter, nobody is contesting you. You're standing there. Yeah, you may have the road fans jeering you or things of that nature, but you've got an open look to the basket. And when you're taking open threes and missing them, and that's another area the Rockets have had trouble in. And Jabari is certainly the worst of the bunch. He may not be the only one, but he is certainly the biggest culprit of the bunch when it comes to wide open shots. Robert, when you're not making your wide open shots, it just tells me there is something going on with his confidence, and it has really leaked into his play on all aspects. I don't know that he was a great defender to begin with, but you kind of hope that he would, pick things up as you go along. But he certainly, at least to this point, hasn't done that.
He's the same. I don't think he's really changed any from last year. The first year he got better. That's just the difference between Silas and Udoka.
Yeah.
But once you get to that point, it's now, okay, what is his potential? What is he capable of? I was never on board, by the way, Stephen. I've heard Rockets fans, everybody thought he was going to be great defensively coming into the NBA. I watched every game at Auburn pretty much, and I didn't see the defense. The reason I wanted the guy was and I'm stunned. I thought that 3-point shooting, the shooting overall just looked elite. And I'm just stunned and shocked after what I saw at Auburn. I mean, I know, you could have a good month or two, but, pretty much the whole season, 30-something games, you think, no, that looks pretty legitimate to me. And his shot looked really pretty. And, he was making NBA type 3-point shots, not just college threes. He was making NBA threes.
Yeah, I honestly wish he had been in that Auburn game last Saturday and missed a bunch of open shots. It would have certainly helped the Cougars out quite a bit. And, he picked the wrong time to be missing shots, Jabari. You had to start making them with the wrong. But yeah, listen, he is a concern. And after this season, if he has not improved at all, then yeah, I think you definitely have to say he's a bust, because he certainly has not lived up to what we all view as a first-round billing.
The other sad part about it, if you're a Rocket front office person, is like, I don't know if he's got any value in the trade market right now. So
I wouldn't think so.
You hope that he just gets better. So maybe you could deal him in the offseason for something and as part of a package, and it might be worth something for another team to have Jabari. I've been saying from jump, like for about a year now, like Jabari is one of the guys that I'm giving up in a trade. I mean, I thought he was like one of the young guys that I'd be willing to give up. At this point, nobody's going to care about him anyway, unless somebody really is seeing something that we're not.
Not singly, no. I think a package certainly would work. But, sometimes it really is about the system you're in. And maybe he just, it's not that Ime Udoka's system is wrong, but some players just don't fit in certain systems. And you have to basically tailor a game around them. But I certainly don't think Jabari is the type of player that a team is going to build around. You put him in a certain role, maybe he can flourish. But yeah, I certainly, as far as trade value, the Rockets aren't going to get that much for him at this point.
Unfortunately, I got more Rockets bad news. Do they Rockets really badly need a backup center? Are we back where we were last year? My answer is a resounding yes, they do. Steven Adams, lateral defense, awful. He'll tell you he's got to just get playing time. He's got to get back up to speed. But how's he going to get back up to speed playing 10 minutes, one game a week? I'm not sure I understand. I understand revving a guy up, but oh my God, 10 minutes, one game a week. It's going to take him like 3 years to rev up at this point. And I wish I understood the Rockets game plan, but they don't tell us anything. And I love what he brought in theory, but so far, big fail. Meanwhile, Jock Landale's defense, awful. Personally, Stephen, I'd rather just go small. Somebody's suggesting turning Jabari into the small ball backup center, which he's done at times and frankly done better in that position. And I agree. I also wonder, where's Cam Whitmore right now? Because if you have Cam Whitmore on the roster, it gives them potential to go small. Whitmore's a great option. He's got some size. He's not, a center, but I mean, look what Oklahoma City's running out there with Chet Holmgren. They're running out a bunch of 5'6" guys.
There's obvious problems. And while I'm not ready to give up on Adams just yet, I think it's just a little bit too soon to be worried about it. The fact is, you're kind of where you were because Jock Landale, I mean, he waited until the end of last season to suddenly turn on the Jets. And he's proven with other teams that he performs in the playoffs. But what about for the rest of the season? And of course, I think he's hurt right now even. Yeah, again, you're kind of back to square one as far as the center position is concerned. Maybe putting Jabari in that role would rejuvenate him a bit. Who knows? And, Cam Whitmore, of course, in the G League now, so get him back. And, I mean, something's going to have to change, though, at some point if you're still getting ineffectiveness, especially from the rebounding and defensive front, in your backup center positions.
Unfortunately, you have teams like the Knicks. I don't know if the Pelicans are going to be looking for a center, but the Knicks are definitely going to be looking for a backup center. There's going to be other teams on the market potentially. And what are you willing to give up? Because it's not like the Rockets are like that piece away. You don't want to give up a first round pick for a backup center. Do they have second round picks that people are going to be excited about for some guy like that? I don't know, but it just seems like they're back where they started. And I'm frankly just perfectly fine with going small ball. If they don't find that particular guy, I like small ball, Stephen, because the league is not full of Jack Sikmas and Patrick Ewings and all of this. There's not guys at the back of a bench that you're like, oh my God, this guy's going to overpower us in the 16 minutes that we got to throw Jabari Smith at center, or the Jeff Greens, or, I mean, I don't want to go back to Jeff Green. I'd rather just go with, the guys that we've got and move Jabari over to center.
Yeah, that's a great point. And obviously you would do it in certain situations. We're not talking trotting out an entire game lineup worth of small ball, because you do need it in certain situations. And a lot of it also depends on the matchups that you have. But I think it's certainly something worth looking at if you're going to continue to get ineffective play, or if you're going to have guys, going out. I mean, Adams, who knows how durable he's going to be through the whole season. And then as far as Landale, his durability is a question, but also he just has not produced for the most part, except in very small snatches the last two seasons.
One other basketball note, Stephen mentioned it earlier, the U of H Auburn. I'll just say this, Stephen, watching U of H, I'm worried because this does not look like the defense rebounding tough Houston Cougar team that I'm used to, or I've gotten used to. It's early. They need to get in gear a little bit. Some guys have been banged up. A couple of them came back. One of the guys still not back. Tugler, I don't know where he's at right now, but it didn't remind me of those teams. And I thought that Auburn was a team that they could beat, and especially at the Toyota Center.
To some degree, I agree with you, but also, I mean, it's the second game of the season, and you certainly don't want to take anything from when they beat Jackson State by like 70-something points. I mean, you can't take from that. So I think Auburn is a good gauge to know where you are. And the fact is, I mean, they had them on the ropes. They had a 9-point lead at one point, gave it up in the second half. That is typically not how a Kelvin Sampson team operates. But I think it's too early in the season to get too concerned about it. And guys are still coming back, and you only had that one game to kind of, get your feet on the ground, and then you play 11th ranked Auburn. So yeah, I was at home, and it was a winnable game. There's no question about it, but I'm going to need to see them play a little bit more, especially against some tougher competition, before I'm going to get too concerned about the fact that, I mean, offense has just never been the Cougars' thing to begin with, but the defense and rebounding, that's Sampson's bread and butter, and that has to come through if this team is even going to get deep in the NCAA tournament again.
A reminder, if you're new to Houston Sports Talk, it's our 12th season now with over 300 guests. Check out Houston Sports Talk's History and Memories YouTube playlist, over 200 classic interviews with Houston sports legends. Thanks again to our new sponsor, MyBookie. Don't forget, they'll double your first deposit up to $1,000. Look for the promo link and code in the description. Had a great one again with you, Stephen. Always fun, man.
Absolutely, Robert. Well, I'm sure we'll have more exciting action, either good or bad, this next week. So we'll talk about it next week.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.